Hi, my name is Patrick Verdonck, and I'm the founder of Rhineland. I'm joined here today by Brian Asparro, a successful clean tech entrepreneur. Brian's a good friend of mine, and he's here to share some of his stories about what he's done in the past and what he's working on today. Welcome, Brian. Tell me a little bit about what you're doing today at CarbonQuest.
Thanks, Patrick. Well, CarbonQuest is a company that we formed about a year and a half ago, and we were seeing this trend happening with decarbonization and how it all relates back to the impacts of climate change. And as we looked at it, we saw that there were opportunities related to buildings, which is our background, my background. As you mentioned, we've formed a few startups in the past related to energy storage, and now this one with decarbonization. And we were thinking that there's a need in the market for decarbonization of buildings in cities. 70% of all carbon emissions in cities come from buildings, and we live in buildings. And so we spent some time looking and researching about what we could potentially do. And we think there's a multi-technology strategy, but we've focused on building a approach to adopting carbon capture in buildings, carbon capture and sequestration. And it's focused on helping building owners reduce their carbon emissions from natural gas, and can reduce.
That is. So you sequester the carbon coming out of the emissions from the building.
Correct. We take the carbon out from the building through a four-step process, and then what we create through that process is liquid CO2. So think of seltzer, and we then try to create, I know it's an often used term, like circular economy, and try utilizing that CO2 and selling it back into the market. In this case, we are focused on concrete manufacturers who are looking to reduce their carbon emissions and can do so by incorporating CO2 into their production and manufacturing. And so in some way, yeah, there is a closed loop in terms of that circular economy.
That's great. So if you think about the power industry and the energy and sustainable industries more generally, you were early into battery storage. You're now an early entrant into the carbon sequestration market. Now, if you think longer term, 20, 30 years from now, where do you see the whole power and energy industry going? What are sort of the big themes that are going to emerge beyond just more renewables? Do you see any wholesale changes to the market? And in particular, are there any that get you really excited?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I know it's a very open-ended one. You know, it seems that just a long-term trend is going to be low-cost, clean generation, and so whether that's solar, whether it's wind, energy storage, there's markets that are supporting the adoption of these technologies, in addition to lots of money that's being put into developing different ways of, creating, cheaper, cleaner generation. And so in the short term, or in the shorter term, I think you're just going to see that more adopted more. And that's going to be, great for all of us that we're looking to decarbonize, society. Longer term beyond that, I think it's going to be pretty interesting about, could you see something where you have some sort of solar and battery plant that is powering your car, which is obvious now with the cars going electric. But could it be something that's, we're all carrying around the ability to generate power, and it becomes much more decentralized in a way that we could never have thought of it. We're going to have an overabundance of the ability to generate and store power. How will the markets catch up with that? How will policy catch up with that? I don't know, but it will be probably very dynamic in that regard. Markets will develop, buying and selling, and power and energy maybe in that case as well. And I think it seems like in my career that having a multi-technology approach helps. It's supportive, right? the moonshots are important, but they're probably more successful. I don't have any data to back this up, but they're probably more successful when there's other things that are, you know, helping to move the needle as well. And it's not an all or nothing proposition, because that some will say we need an all or nothing proposition. My perspective is, you know, we can create an all, or we can get to where we need to by looking at a couple different technologies and ways of doing it. So that's kind of how I would answer that question. I know it's kind of generic, but
no, it's very interesting to get your perspective. So the next question I wanted to ask you is, you know, you've now founded and been involved with the founding of a few companies. If you were to turn back time and give advice to yourself as a 23, 24-year-old looking to do something entrepreneurial in the energy space, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm 44, so I have 21 years of going back to, which I think is it's important, because you have to think back about how far,
Sure.
you know, what does that mean? It's a great question. I think, you know, I'm going to say something that I've heard many times, and it's so true. And yet it seems like it's hard to kind of sometimes really understand what it means, but it's, you know, betting on yourself, right?
Yeah.
And I've heard a lot of, like, you know, do what you love, and then other people say, no, that's stupid, do what you're good at, right? And then you'll love it, right? But if I had to give advice back to myself, I'd say, you know, bet on yourself. That try to understand how markets work. Try to understand what risks you're willing to take and what you really think is risky.
Sure.
Because I think a lot of times, even for myself today, you know, trying to understand what really is risk, or, oh, you know, the world, I've lost my job, the world is just ended, right? No, it hasn't ended. You'll be fine, right? And so taking that mindset, if that makes any sense, will be very helpful. The other, I think I would say, so that's one. Two is flexibility. Now, what I mean by that is being flexible in maybe what you want to do or what you're good at, being curious.
Okay.
I, in learning, I mean, I've kind of shifted my career from finance to more energy. In the last, you know, basically half my career in finance, half my career in energy. And I've noticed that maybe it just suits me better. I've been more of a generalist. I'm wondering if we value generalists more going forward because of all the technology that's going to be adopted. And it's okay to be flexible, right? It's okay to learn different things and not necessarily be an expert at one thing. And I might be wrong. Someone may disagree with me in that approach and say, no, it's better to be. But for me, if I had to go back to myself and knowing what I knew when I was 21, it's okay to be a generalist. And that, I believe, to some degree, has helped me involved in early stage companies, and helped me not to get too high, too low. Help me kind of learn, and, you know, with energy storage, stay patient. With carbon capture, try to see how can we make this work.
Keeping
And
an open mind. Yeah.
keeping an open mind. I know those are general kind of comments, but that's kind of how I see it.
That's great. Well, look, Brian, these comments have been really insightful and really adds a lot of color to a lot of the discussions that are going on in the energy space today. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.